What's up, Active Lifers? Welcome back to the Active Life Podcast. I'm Dr. Sean Pastuch, and I'm your host. Today, my guest is Laura Delizonna. Laura is a super high achiever who wrote an article for the Harvard Business Review called High Performing Teams Need Psychological Safety. Here's how to create it. That article has been shared millions of times. Laura is the author of 4 books. She's an executive coaching specialist who makes sure that work environments are both safe and inspiring for staff to be executional within. Now, the reason I asked her to come on today is because what I believe she does an exceptional job of, especially here in the year 2022, I find this to be unique, is she fosters safe, creative, productive work environments without confusing it with them being nice work environments, fluffy work environments, woo-woo work environments. On the show, she talks about topics that are the difficult things for business leaders, especially to navigate. How do you help team members who are struggling to be more successful before letting them go? If you do have to let a team member go, how do you do that while creating safety for everybody else at the same time? Not having them get to a place where they're concerned that they might be next, that they're not safe in their position. And really, it all boils down to creating enough trust that the interest of leadership is to afford well-being to everybody within the organization. I think Laura does a tremendous job breaking this down on the podcast, and I'm not going to wait one more second before I get you to it. Laura Delizonna, welcome to the Active Life Podcast.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm really excited to speak with you today. I've enjoyed reading the things that you've written, the articles that you've written. I've enjoyed listening to you on podcasts. I'm looking forward to diving into your books. And I think that what we're going to discuss today will be helpful not only for me, selfishly, but also for all of our listeners in terms of their ability to exercise leadership in a way that is empathetic and that is tactical and that affords other people their pursuit of well-being. So I'm excited.
Wonderful. I am too. It's good to be here.
I want to start off with what I think is kind of a paradoxical situation that I want you to clear up for me. In my research about you, one of the things that I heard you say, I believe, on a podcast was that you had your moment of clarity while sitting on a mountaintop in Egypt, looking out into the landscape. You realized the path I'm on is not a path to happiness or freedom that I wanted to be on. And the reason why I called that paradoxical is because for many people, the goal, the life goal, is getting to the mountaintop in their Egypt, their proverbial mountaintop in their proverbial Egypt. There you were sitting on it. This is not for me. How did that happen?
I was in a time in my life when I was really asking questions about, I was in my early 20s. What do I want my life to be about? How do I want to live? What is life about, right? I was kind of soul searching. That's how I would describe it. And I had this belief that, and I still do, which guides all of my work, which is that if we all lived a full expression of ourselves, that is a life of thriving and flourishing. An expression of ourselves. That's so easy to say, but difficult to live. And I felt this sort of dissonance in that moment. Like, yes, I was in this beautiful place. I was traveling. I was in college, taking a break from college, like very privileged, very fortunate. So it's not that it was like a moment of devastation, but instead it was a moment of what could be. And I've always been a sort of idealist, why not? Why can't we do this? How could we make things happen so that benefit all of us? And so it was a moment for me of saying, wait a minute, this path is okay, but it's not going to lead me to my best life, to a full expression of me as an individual.
What did you feel like was missing? I mean, you're saying that what was missing was your ability to express yourself. Why?
I felt like I was kind of going through the motions, like doing what I was, what was being given to me, sort of, rather than carving out my path, rather than digging deep and saying, what is it that I want and need to do in this life? We needed more discovery. I wanted to discover. Now that sounds very abstract and I don't know how it sounds to others, but it was, I felt a sort of lack of fulfillment. I felt like this is not going to get me to fulfillment. I felt like there was just a dissonance in me. It was that there could be more. And so I needed to discover that. It was a moment saying, well, there's more for me to discover here. And I need to pause and question, where am I going? It was more of that, the sort of, where am I going? And I need to figure this out.
And where were
rather than just keep trudging.
Where were you going at the time? What were you doing?
I was, I was young. I was 20 years old, I was just a kid. I was in college at University of Southern California, and I was studying international relations. It was very interesting to me. And yet I felt like, like I needed to dig a little deeper. I wanted to work with people who were inspiring. I wanted to learn from people who were inspiring. I felt like, and still do, that there's a lot of opportunity in life, and I needed to pause, take a step back, and say, what is this really about? And so what I did with that is I did take a pause. I ended up dropping out of school, just kind of finding my way. I wanted to, I didn't feel totally happy there at that university because of me, really, not because of the place. I needed to discover a little bit. I ended up going the opposite way. I wanted to have a positive impact. And so I was sort of approaching that from the top down. Like, I want to have a positive impact in society. So I'll work with international relations, the leaders of nations. And that's where my passion was, is kind of going towards that direction, whether it was in working in international spheres. And then I said, wait a minute, I think actually my skills and the way I think and what I'm most fascinated with, and the heart of the problem, is the individual, like the individuals that make up those nations. So of course, I was very philosophical in this. But that's what was calling me. So I switched majors when I did end up going back to school, and I studied psychology, because I wanted to know, like, how can we change the individual so that we can change the organization, so we can change society. So it was a bottom-up approach. And that's why I made that shift into psychology. But what's interesting is that I came full circle, because again, my intention, the reason for me going into these things, and what I really felt from a young age, is that I want to have a positive impact in society. So now my work as a psychologist is going back to the leaders, so that to exert change in the society of an organization, the culture, to exert change through those leading organizations, to exert change in the way that we think in society. And so I sort of flipped the model, but coming full circle to, again, have an impact and change, exert my change as much as I can, as part of the team of many that are exerting change in society.
The way you describe that makes me feel like you thread a needle. And the needle I'm describing is, I believe is probably the wrong way to start this. From my experience, the people who are the best at philosophizing on their life, the people who are the best at sitting on the top of the mountain, looking out and saying, am I happy? Oftentimes are not the same people who are the best at saying, tactically speaking, am I doing what needs to be done? Meaning it's like a left brain, right brain, emotional task, however you would best describe it. And you were able to not only take the moment and feel the emotion, but then take the appropriate action to change the feeling. You following me?
Yeah.
So my question is around, now I can say I believe many people right now believe they're happy, and they believe that they're doing what they were meant to be doing, in part because they've never considered the possibility that they're not, or that they're not as happy as is possible for them, as driven as is possible for them. Do you have anything that you would recommend everybody kind of do as an observation of themselves?
Yes. Pause and ask a question. So often we get into busyness or just, our external structures of life. We just go about doing. And we forget to pause and ask the question, what could be? What could be for me? What could be for my family? What could be for my organization? What could be? We get into these norms that then, they're sort of grooves, and we just live in the groove of our life without stepping back and really dreaming big a bit. I once told my father, I said, Dad, the greatest gift or the greatest curse you've given me is to dream big. I was blessed in that I did have parents who dreamed big. They said you could be whatever you want to be. If you want to be the president of the United States, you could be that. But you have to work hard to get there. And I see that as a gift, but also a curse, because sometimes that can create an unrealistic pressure of, a perfectionism. So you want to watch that. There is no ceiling on happiness. We'll never arrive. Never like, okay, now I'm happy. All good now. So if we feel, and the reason why I mention that is because also there can be it's not, my life isn't good enough. And that is a recipe for despair, of dissatisfaction. So the pursuit of happiness can lead to less happiness if we aren't careful. Again, there is this sort of threading the needle here, right? To ask the big questions and to receive what the gifts and the blessings and the joys that are there. And sometimes that is one and the same. When we can turn into the gifts, the blessings, the beauty in our lives, that is in fact the way to satisfaction and happiness.
It's interesting how you describe that, and I'll share with you why. I have a story I'd like to tell you about my past that will perhaps bring some commonality to the context here. I grew up similar to you in some way, shape, or form, I guess, at least with great parents who told me always, you can be whatever you want to be. There is nothing that you cannot do as long as you put your mind to it. And I share with you that blessing and that curse of big thinking, because there's this thought of like, well, why not me? What is it about everybody else that they can do that I can't? Nothing. Of course I can do that same thing. And then there is the potential for comparison. The comparison of, well, this other person's doing this really well. Why are they better than me? All that kind of stuff, when it has nothing to do with you. So I was finally at a point of what most people would consider success in 2017, making a good living as a chiropractor and a gym owner. There were people flying out to my clinic for care because it was different than what they could get where they were, from California, from Finland to New York. And I left it because I was sitting there one day in a meeting for something else, and I felt myself lit up. And then I asked myself on the drive home, that was my pause, how come I never feel that way in my office? And that day I quit in my mind, and 2 months later, I left in reality. And the hardest part of it, I'm curious about this for you as well, was telling my parents I was going to do it. Did you find any difficulty with the fear of judgment, shame, or any of that around people who, frankly, in my case, had no interest in casting either of those?
Yeah, I've experienced that many times in my life where, if you're going to go off the path and cut your own path, there's going to be fear, right? There's going to be fear of the unknown and uncertainty. And is this the right thing? And I don't know. And who knows? Nobody knows. There's also going to be others who are watching out for your best interest, who say, no, don't do it. Don't do it. That's too risky. You got a good thing. Don't mess it up. It's happened many times over and over again. But yes, back when I dropped out of school and my mom was like, don't leave school. You're never going to go back. And I was like, of course I'll go back. I love school. I'm just taking a pause. Then there was another warning. I was at Stanford as a postdoc and then as a staff psychologist, researcher. I was right on the path towards the academic career through Stanford. Again, a situation that I could have only dreamed of. And I said, wait a minute, this isn't where I want to be. I think I could do more for me, different. That would be better suit me, my strengths, and how I want to live my life. And I'm going to leave. I'm going to leave Stanford. And again, there was the warnings. Don't leave Stanford. Why are you doing that? That's foolish. And when I did, and I was afraid to talk about it, but when I did speak about it, and when I actually did it, it was the best thing I ever did.
I've heard you describe that as leaving the church.
Uh-huh.
The church, and in that regard, I know, by the way, you're still part-time teaching at Stanford, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And so you didn't leave. You didn't say this is out of my life, but you left the path of being a professional researcher, a professional academic, if you will, to go ahead and do the things that you were researching and teaching more of, which I have a lot of respect for. I'm trying to figure out which way I want to go with this question. I want to ask both. I'm going to ask one first instead of both at the same time. I talk to a lot of business leaders who, especially in the fitness space, who are making decent money, running a business that is no longer aligned with the values that they had when they started it. And the fear that they run into is, if I change the values of this business, I'm effectively starting over again, and I need this income to live this life that I have set up for myself. But it's this vicious cycle of, now you're running a business that's no longer aligned with your values to make your money, though. So how do you reconcile that? I don't know. I have to figure it out, but right now, you follow me in this circle?
Yep.
How do they get out of that circle?
Again, it starts with a pause. Take a step back. I love journaling as a way to do that, in a practical way. So we're not talking about, like throwing everything out the window and moving to, Vermont and opening a bed and breakfast. Like, maybe you want to do that, but we're not talking about these like major shifts just sort of on a whim, but instead really looking inward and saying, and this is how I did it, is what do I want my life to be about? How do I want to be living? Like, fast forward to the end of my life, or 20 years from now, or 10 or 5 years, and imagine your future self. What do you want that life to be and feel like? And to bring a sort of like urgency to this, like, we have one life to live. How are you going to live it? Marie Oliver says, how are you going to live this one wild and precious life? And so not wasting time, not wasting our precious days by doing things that don't feel right. So pausing, but not being, sort of impulsive about it, being thoughtful and strategic. So yeah, I left Stanford, but I didn't leave Stanford. Like I still teach there. I've been teaching there for 16 years, but I'm not an academic there. I go out and I work in companies and I do the things that I carved my own path. And so it's a blend of being practical and also, but first, imagining what would best suit you. It's about fit, best suit your strengths, best suit your values, so that you're living a value-driven life, because that's when we feel in alignment. That's when we feel in flow. That's when we do our best work. That's when it feels exciting. Even in the hard times, it's worth it.
So one of the biggest fears that these business owners often have isn't even about the money. It's about the other people who work in their business. And I know that you do a lot of executive leadership coaching about creating safe work environments. And a lot of the fear is around, if I change this, the staff might not be on board anymore. And the staff might feel as though I abandoned them, which would lead to them abandoning me, which would leave me all by myself with potentially clients and customers who are also feeling abandoned because they're here because of the values that I had when I was 25 years old and I opened this business. And now here I am 30, 35 years old and I don't have those values anymore. And I want to bring these people with me to this better life. How do you create the conversation with the employee, with the staff, that affords them the safety to tell you the truth about how they feel, while also not leaving the room for it's possible that we'll keep doing what you want, which is out of alignment with the business owner's values?
Yeah. So you said it. Bring them with you. So first, step back and get real with yourself. Where do I want to go? What's the gap between where I am and where I want to go? And maybe you don't even know specifically. You just know that there's a gap there. And so you feel called to transform. And one of the biggest mistakes, most common mistakes that I see leaders making is that they feel like they got to do it alone. So include others in that process. Once you have your time and you do some introspection and you can define that as much as you can, then include others, whether it's first your trusted others, your so-called counsel, right? And then include people in the conversation, invite. So often leaders feel like they have to come up with the solution and then present it. That's a mistake. One, it leaves everyone else out. It closes the door to input. It closes the door to creativity. It closes the door to them. It sort of minimizes and devalues them unintentionally, right? We're trying to be of service as a leader to provide the pathway. But what it does is it closes them out instead of inviting them in and saying, hey, this is the process I'm in. I have a sense that there's somewhere else we could go. I want to go somewhere else and I'm figuring it out and I want your input. How do you feel? What do you think? What could be for you? So getting their vision, opening them up to saying, if we did something different here, what might that look like? And to really creating conversations and yes, you have to have the safety to do that for people to actually give you a real answer and not just the answer they think you want. To not just give you answers, but actually engage in exploration. To say, I don't know. And that starts with the leader saying, I don't know, I need your help.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, I'm going to give you a specific example and I want to see if I'm hearing you correctly about the way that you would recommend they handle it. A lot of the clients we work with are small gym, so micro gym, 150 to 200 member group fitness environments. And they are looking at their clients and they are saying, we made you a promise when you enrolled, and we simply cannot keep it if we continue providing service in these large groups, because your problems are so different than this other person's problems. You need individual attention that is not going to happen in a group. But you've been here for 3 years and it hasn't happened. We'd be foolish to believe something is going to change. What you're describing, if I'm hearing you right, is the pain that gym owner would be in is, I don't feel fulfilled by the results my business can promise people anymore. And then before making a change, what you would recommend they do is start asking staff if they feel the same way, or share, I feel this way because X, Y, Z. What do you think of this?
Yeah. So I always like to start these conversations or similar conversations with the undeniable place that everyone wants to go, the positive, greater intention. We want to have a workplace where everyone's flourishing, where our clients are flourishing, where our staff, where our leaders, where it's an environment where people are flourishing, however you define that. That's our objective. Now let's reverse engineer that. Let's work backwards. So we are in a place now where this model we had doesn't seem to be producing that outcome to the extent that it could. Not this language, of course, but this is the idea. Then we're not going in our most efficient and effective way towards that goal, towards that objective. So let's have a conversation about this. In other words, let's innovate. Like there's, so often another mistake that I hear leaders making is that they feel like they can't change their mind. It's like, no, change or die. Like the world has changed. You need to change too. And that's not a bad thing to change your mind. It's a good thing. It shows growth. That is what innovation is. That is what innovation requires. So don't be afraid to innovate, to change the model, to say, hey, what hasn't changed is our greater objective. We want to serve this value, this mission that we have. Now, let's not get stuck in the way we've always done things. Let's take a step back and brainstorm and talk about it and hear, to what extent are we meeting that objective? We're not? Okay, interesting. Let's get really curious. That's the seed, the spark of creativity. It's curiosity.
Is that flexible thinking what you're describing? I've heard you use the term flexible thinking. Is that an example of it?
Yeah, absolutely. As opposed to rigid thinking, rigid mindsets, limiting mindsets. It kills businesses and it kills happiness.
Mm-hmm. What do you do when somebody on the team lacks the awareness of the reality? So let's say, for example, there are 5 people on a team, a leader, 4 staff. The leader says, I believe we're struggling to get these results for our clients, and we want to be able to get these results. 2 other people say, I agree. Third person says, I don't know. I don't really have an opinion on this. I don't have enough information. And the 4th person says, I don't agree. If you look at this person, we did it. If you look at this person, we did it. If you look at this person, we did it. The people who didn't get the result, which, by the way, in reality, are outweighing the ones who did by a factor of 25 to 1. The difference is these people got out of it what they put in, and these people got out of it what they put in, and they left too early, or they didn't come often enough, or they didn't take the coaching that we gave them. In my opinion, that's a blind spot, that it's possible for someone to get the result with you, but not likely for them to get the result with you. If the owner is in agreement with my perspective on something like that, how do they open the eyes of the staff member to that?
2 things. First, listen, really listen. So that might be sort of this active listening where you say, okay, so if I'm understanding you correctly, you think that we are meeting the objectives because these X number of clients are happy with our services. They've met their outcomes. Is that correct?
Yes.
yes, and so that's a second. Yes, and where I'm concerned are the other X number of people who have not. Or flip it of, it's not going into, that sort of quantitative analysis, but maybe it's a step back and say, yes, I hear you. And I think we can do better. And what I'm curious about is if we took a step back and thought about, started from scratch, sort of, would we still have this same model? Could we just do the thought experiment? So invite them in. They don't have to agree with you. Could we just do this thought experiment for a moment without making a decision that this is what we're going to do, and imagine a little bit? So you're not asking them to commit or to agree, but just to come along with you.
I like that. It frees them to think in a way that is non-committal.
Right.
I like that. So part of the reason that I really wanted to talk to you, and I shared this with you earlier, is because I hear, I believe my responsibility as the owner of a business is to create a safe and inspiring work environment in which our team and our clients can pursue a commonly shared mission. Right? If my job is done well and we polled everybody on the team and said, how safe do you feel at your workplace? Safe meaning, in my opinion, safe means you know your job. You know how to judge yourself. Did you do a good job or not? You don't need somebody else to come along and say, good job. Or, you messed this up. You know how to advance. You know what's expected of you. And you're safe to voice an opposing position or to support a position and to have conflict conversation without risking your job or the future of your career. I believe all of those are elements of safety. Not just softening everything up so everybody's actually overthinking just how to say hello in the morning to make sure that everyone feels safe about how we say hello here. When does firing an employee become the thing to do to create a safe work environment, absent that employee doing something egregious that is clearly damaging to others?
Yeah, sometimes creating a safe and inspired work environment is not only getting the right people on the bus, but getting the wrong people off the bus. And when done in a respectful and, when possible, and it usually is possible, co-created sort of way, then it makes everyone feel safe and taken care of, including the staff and those who stay, because it can be very threatening to see a coworker, even especially if it's a coworker you like, fired or managed out. And it also can just, for the person who leaves, they can feel safe, even though they're being asked to leave or being managed out, if done with skillfulness. So again, I mentioned co-creating solutions. This comes into play with creating a safe environment, even when it does require firing or letting someone go. So including them in the conversation. I was just having a coaching call, executive coaching with a CEO of a startup doing quite well. But there's a person who's sort of in the wrong position. And so we were discussing the reality that's coming into view, that this person needs to not be there anymore.
In the company or in the position?
That's exactly the question I asked. The CEO said this person needs to not be in the company anymore, but I like him. What do I do? I said, well, you like him. That's a key piece. I think he's actually doing an okay job, just in the wrong role. So right now there is no other role for him, but could there be? What does he want to do? Usually, when there's not a fit, when there's a problem, everybody feels it and everybody knows it. But a lot of times, no one or a few people are actually voicing it. And so calling it out first, in a one-on-one respectful way, like, how are you feeling about this? Doing that inquiry. How are you feeling? Do you feel like we're making outcomes? Do you feel like you're reaching your outcomes? How do you feel in this position? Usually the answer, if there's a problem, is going to be, I don't feel very good about this. And then where are the strengths? What do you want to be doing? So where's that sort of juice? This is if you're trying to, fit them, but even if you're managing out, what do you want to be doing? Sort of questions. What lights you up? You don't seem lit up anymore. And then by engaging in this inquiry, the solution usually presents itself like, wow, I would much rather be doing this sales piece than now I'm managing people and I want to be selling stuff. I love selling stuff, right? And so that would be an example of like, okay, is there actually a way? Is there a role that could be created or a shift or some sort of job crafting that leverages your strengths? That would be better for everyone. Or, our company's changed and I'm at a loss because I respect you, I respect your work, and not sure where to go with this. Do you have a solution? Well, is there a way that I could support you to find a better position? However that process needs to happen in that conversation. But the point is to invite them in and not being afraid to call out what everyone's feeling, the elephant in the room. So if we were to unpack that and sort of codify it, it's, again, starting with that greater intention. I want, the company to be flowing and doing excellent. I want you to be feeling great, feeling supported. We have a gap. You don't seem as lit up as you were before. It feels like there's some tensions here or whatever it is. There's the gap between where we are and where we want to go. How could we get there? I have some thoughts about it. I want to hear yours. Now let's get creative about a solution. And maybe it's making the hard decision that this just isn't a place where you can flourish as much as you did before.
I think that's great. And I think the next critical thing for leaders to understand, and this is, I struggled with this a lot. And I fortunately haven't found myself in this position in about a year, but I still find myself not knowing exactly what the next thing that would be appropriate to do is. Somebody has to be let go or somebody decides to leave. In a small company, especially, 5 people up to 100 people, probably. I don't know. I don't have 100-person business yet. There is this ripple of like, oh my goodness, why did that person have to go? And now as the leader, I've found myself in the position of, well, if I told them the whole truth, it would endanger other people on the team, and I can't do that. And if I don't tell them the whole truth, then there are a lot of questions left over as to why did Sean do that? And so I need to, once again, thread that needle. And the only thing I've been able to land on myself is work so hard to earn people's trust every day that they believe the decision that was made ultimately was the only decision that there was to make. Is there a better way to do it?
I think that's spot on. So we have filters through which we interpret events, situations, right? And so if there's a negative filter in the company, anything you do is going to be seen as negative, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, there'll be questions, suspicion. Oh, well, he said this, but really I'm sure that's not true. The flip side, if that is a positive filter, if you've built an environment of trust and safety where people feel taken care of, where they feel actually cared for as people as well as employees, then they're going to say, well, that filter will give you the benefit of the doubt, where you say, wow, I'm sorry to see that person go. I'm sure he said there was a good reason for it. I believe him. Mm-hmm. So, the two things here is it starts with long before the event happens is when your work happens. It's sort of the creating the culture, the environment, the relationships. It's all about the relationships, creating solid, positive relationships so that when the hard times come, when the storm comes in, you have a buffer, you have a context. It's like investing, putting money in the bank for hard times. So you can pull upon that when you need it.
Yeah. It's amazing how so many things are the same and we have the tendency to look at them as different. The relationship with your significant other, if you have one, with your kids, if you have them, with your physical fitness, all of these things. How do I look the way I want to look? Well, you do things for years that make incremental change every day that's unrecognizable. And then one day you look in the mirror and you're like, oh, this is different than it was 5 years ago. But the work isn't done the day you want to look different. And it's the same in business. It's the same in leadership. It's the same in all relationships. One of the most common situations that I've navigated recently and wrong in the past, and wrong is the improper way to say it, less ideally than I think I could have, is when there's a group of people and one person in the group is, for example, just totally missing the point. And so they're actively speaking and engaging in the group. In the past, what I have done is told that person why they were wrong or why that's not what they should be doing in front of everybody else, which makes that person look and feel unsafe. Right. And now makes everyone else wonder, if I speak and I'm, quote, wrong, is Sean going to make me feel that way? How do you recommend handling group environments when there is a correction that needs to be made without that correction being devastating to the psyche of the person you're making it to?
Yeah. Public praise, private criticism. So that really means is, yes, you need to call out and protect the group. There's some dynamic that's happening. The sour apple can ruin the bushel, right? Mm-hmm. So if there's a comment or something, you have to protect the group and step in. However, to do that in a way where everyone does feel safe, including the person who you're correcting, so to speak. Or redirecting, more accurately stated. Because everybody's watching. And how you treat others is how they're going to expect you're communicating. This is how I'll also treat you. Mm-hmm. So if one person is thrown under the bus, everybody ducks and covers, right? And so this can be done without, of course, nobody wants to be wrong, and it can feel very easily embarrassing and even humiliating to be called out in a public group. And we're as social animals, are highly attuned to what people think of us. And we often assume the worst, right? So we are on guard for whether people think that we're doing okay and questioning our competency or not. So want to, you talked about appreciation earlier. And this goes back to your fitness starts months, years before that day that you want to feel and look good. Mm-hmm. Appreciation is a really powerful way to create a safe environment. That's one aspect of it, where people know that they're seen at their best and they're given the benefit of the doubt, therefore. A lot of leaders and people just in general just sort of assume people know that we admire them, that we like them, that no news is good news. That's a mistake. We want to be seen as humans at our best. We want to be witnessed. We want to be seen for who we are. We want our efforts to be recognized. We put hard hours. We compromise our personal time for our work, right? Oftentimes. So we want that to be appreciated. So I use this tool a lot with in the workplace, but also in personal relationships. I call it big recognition or big appreciation. It's an acronym, and it's a way to give impactful expressions of appreciation, because usually they fall flat. It might be like, hey, Sean, thanks. Great job. It's nice, but it's weak. Mm-hmm. So instead, big appreciation is B stands for the behavior. Get specific with the behavior. Hey, when you gave that idea the other day in the meeting, when that high impact created a breakthrough that nobody else saw, you saw something that wasn't seen. And G is greater strength. You have a keen eye for thinking outside the box, and that made a huge difference for our team. It helped us get to that solution. That was like 3 sentences, right? But what it does is it calls it out, especially if you can do that in a way that's immediate, specific, and even publicly, and you create a habit of that, then that can create an environment where when there is a redirect, people know that they're appreciated, they're seen in their strengths.
Every Monday I send an email out that's company-wide. It used to be an email, now it's a Slack message. And one of the things I used to do in that message every time was to name people in the company who had done exceptional things, to discuss what it was that they did and how it impacted other people in a positive way. And your validation is actually, I don't often look for it. It's not something that I find myself valuing all that much, is external validation, but it does feel good that there's value to that, because it's one of the harder things that I do, because I'm not in contact with everybody in the company every day. And so I'm oftentimes hearing things secondhand, writing them down, trying to remember them. And you're reminding me that one of the things I need to do is ask the other leadership team members to more frequently highlight things that staff members have done with that kind of detail, with the big acronym in mind. Because then it doesn't all have to be me. I can make myself less important, which would be ideal. One of the things that I found interesting, and the question I wanted to pivot to before that I said I'm going to ask one instead of both at the same time, is you left teaching as a career, took it up as a hobby, so that you could do the things that you were passionate about teaching. How important is it that people in academia have also spent time in the doing world before they come and teach it?
Everyone has their role, right? So it takes a team to exert change in a major way. That's, we have individual contributors, we have leaders, we have specialists. So researchers need to be specialists in research. It is an expertise. So I'm not going to expect every researcher to go out and live in the field. It would just be too much, right? They need to know how to do their stats, how to have sound methodology, how to do their work exceptionally well. There does, however, need to be a connection, a tie to what are the real world problems that most need their expertise, right? So a communication, just like on a team across silos, like let's have our specialists and communicate with each other so that the entire engine, is working together fluidly in collaboration across disciplines, across roles, across functions, so that we are truly innovating towards where it's important to go, not just, what occurs to us in a sort of non-synchronized sort of way.
I remember having a business teacher who I asked questions about. Like, I didn't know any better. I was in college, and I was asking questions about their experience, like when they did that, and they didn't have any. And as a student, I immediately checked out. Now, I was 19, 20 years old, so some of my responsibility there, we can share that. But I immediately checked out. I had a physics teacher who only taught 2 hours a week because he spent the rest of his time doing the things he was talking about. I found his class so engaging. And now this is, of course, N equals 1, anecdotal experience. I'm not the researcher. But this was the guy who would do things like you come down to the front of the room and somebody is going to create electricity by pedaling that bike. And when they can't pedal anymore, the lights in the room are going to go off. How did that happen? And I'm like, this guy just understands how I think. And so I've always wondered about where that line is between academia for academia's sake and academia from experience and through experience.
Yeah, that it comes back, I do think, to that communication where we need to be solving the most important problems in a way where it's where there's a practical application. So that cross communication where people out in the field in the workplace are saying, these are our problems. This is what we need to be solved. And then the academics go and, find the mediating factors and the variables at play and not making assumptions about what is causing what's correlational, but go and try to solve the real problems and then feed them back to those who are in the field in the front lines and say, hey, here's one possibility. How does that work? Mm-hmm. And then they go try it out and they say, sort of, not really. Go back to the drawing board. And then they go back to the lab and so to speak and revise. And so there's this iterative process. And that's where I see me sort of being in the middle. So I've been in both worlds.
That's why I wanted to ask you.
Yeah, I've been in both worlds. I've been in academics. I understand research. I know what makes good research. I know what makes bad research. I have also been in companies. Yesterday, I was delivering a workshop with leaders in a tech company, right? I hear their real problems. I hear their conversations. I see what it looks like getting into their world. And then I go back to the research and I say, hey, have the conversation. Hey, researchers, what are you discovering about this? What are the mediating factors in creating trust and collaboration? Let's not make assumptions about this. Let's not be armchair psychologists. That's why I got a PhD. I don't want to be an armchair psychologist. I want to know what the facts are. Mm-hmm. We've relied on assumptions way too long. Now we have a science. Let's go to the science and apply it and have this two-way communication. So nothing happens the gold doesn't happen in a silo. The gold happens. We create these true solutions and innovations with multidisciplinary conversations where we're solving real problems, the most important problems, with real solutions.
I like the collaborative approach. That's just a topic that kept on coming up for me in my own academic experience. When I was in chiropractic school, learning about how to run a practice and treat patients from doctors who didn't have an active practice and hadn't treated patients outside of the school. And one of the things I always felt was after you graduate, you should have to be out of the school for 10 years before you can come back and work at the school. That was just one of the things, because I know there are kids who graduated with me in my graduating class in 2009 who never left. And they had a fellowship on campus and now they're teaching. And I'm like, what are you teaching? You're trying to teach doctors how to doctor. If you were teaching microbiology, sure. But you're trying to teach future doctors how to doctor and you've never seen a patient off campus. That doesn't. So I appreciate the way that you handled that question. You wrote 2 books, Mindful Leader book and Thrive book. Neither of them have book in the title, right? The Mindful Leader and Thrive. I haven't read them yet, admittedly, but I've heard you talk about what went well as an acronym also, WWW. Is that something that you cover in those books? And can you just discuss what that is a little bit?
Yeah. So there are actually 4 books.
Oh, I apologize.
There's Thrive, Self-Coaching for Happiness and Success. There's Mindful Leaders. There's Mindful. And there's Enhancing Emotional Intelligence. The 3 W's, what went well, and we could add a 4th, and why. Mm-hmm. That is one of the foundational questions, habits of mind that leads to positive outcomes or positive processes in throughout those 3 books and across domains. So this is a powerful question. What went well, and what was your role in creating that positive outcome? Is a powerful question to shift our attention towards empowerment, because let me change the way I'm answering that. 3 W's is a question. What went well? That is a question that is foundational to really all of my work. It's such a simple question. I find that people in my workshops are coming back years later saying, I'm still doing the 3 W's. And sometimes I'm like, why? Why is that so powerful? Well, it's powerful because people say, first of all, it changes where I'm looking. It changes where I'm looking from the problem to the solution, and not just to the solution, but to the process that got me to that positive outcome. So it's creating a habit of mind. It's not 3 W's, what went wrong. It's the 3 W's, what went well. And what the question you ask your mind is the answer that you will find. So it sets the mind on an expedition to figure out how this positive outcome arose. What did you do? Empowers you as a person, as a team. What did we do well here? Towards a process that you can replicate, towards a realization of where your levers are, what you can do, what you can actually do and say and act, and the choices you can make that lead to positive outcomes.
So is that going to be the title of book 5?
I like it.
I think maybe it should be. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm just going to put that thought out there for you.
I like it.
I do too. How do you apply what you learned through academia and through writing, through doing the research, I imagine, that was necessary to write the books? Because just because you've experienced the things, you've learned the things, doesn't mean that you are yet capable of coaching somebody else on the things or writing the books about the things. So, the best example are world-class athletes who couldn't teach you how to do anything that they do. Doesn't mean they're not world-class at something. It just means they're not world-class at 2 things. So when you're doing executive coaching, what does the relationship look like? I imagine the simple thing would be read this book and ask me the questions. But that's obviously not what people are paying you for.
When I'm working with someone one-on-one, first of all, I want to know, where do they want to go? I want them to dream big, and I want them to invite me into that dream so that I understand. Because when I understand what lights them up, what makes them feel like them at their best, then I can step in, and my job is to help them get there. So I can imagine them, and that's part of my job, is I imagine them at their best, even sometimes beyond what they can imagine, because sometimes we see the other strengths in a way that they don't see for themselves, or to see their potential, unrealized potential. And that's one of my favorite parts of working one-on-one with people, is to imagine their potential, even beyond what they can see and they can imagine. And then I ask myself and I ask them, well, how could you get there? So what has worked in the past? What feels resonant to you? Like what fits the way you think, the way your life is structured? And together we figure out what the steps are to get there. Now, there are skill sets along that path. And that's what I see as my job, is to help the leader, to help whoever I'm working with develop the skill sets that will take them further than where they are now. Because we, with most of this stuff, like we thought of it, like, yeah, that would be a good idea. Or, I've tried to do that, but it didn't work. Or, yeah, someone else told me that. We've gotten some bits and pieces of information. It's usually not like, oh my gosh, I've never in my whole life ever thought of that. But instead, it's kind of like fitness. Like I know what I should do, but I don't know. It just doesn't happen. How do I get there? And that's the job of the coach, is to come in and say, okay, here are the levers to press. Here's some tools to help you. Here's some paradigm shifts that are going to open up a brand new world for you, and to help them walk with them through that door to gain the habits, to gain the skillfulness that will take them there. Now, what we know from the research is that becoming an expert in anything requires two components, and it ain't going to happen without it. One is deliberate practice. The athlete that does the drills over and over and over again, but not just doing the drills, because practice does not make perfect. Practice makes practice. And if you're practicing the imperfection, then you're going to reach imperfection. So it's deliberate practice with expert feedback. So you do the drill, or you go out and you play in the game and you say, okay, this is where you went wrong. This is where you could improve. This is where you were slightly off. Your tone was off. Your delivery was off. You were on the right track. However, the timing was off. And so this is how you modify and hone that delivery. And that's how you get to expertise, whether you're talking about being a world-class gymnast, or you're talking about being a computer programmer, or being a leader.
And who is the leader you typically work with? Are these people who are running Fortune 500 companies? Are these people who are leaders of themselves, or who are they?
Yeah, I work across industries. I've worked from fashion to automotive, to high tech, to financial companies. Worked in companies that have 400,000 employees, and I've worked with companies that have 14 employees.
400,000 is a lot.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. That's a lot of people to think about when you go to bed at night.
Yes. And yet the processes are the same. They play out differently, and you have to, kind of come at it from different angles. But people are people. People want to feel appreciated. They want to feel trust. They want to feel innovated. They want to feel that they can bring their best ideas, and that their efforts will be well utilized, and their time will be well spent, that it'll be worth it. And so, I work with leaders, and I work across companies. I've done train the trainer programs where I work with managers for a couple hours in a group, and then give them guides, and they go out and they lead process groups and their teams through a learning journey. So it's multidimensional. There are a lot of different ways to come about this. I work with leaders, CEOs, or senior leaders that are then exerting change top down, or with the individual contributor that's trying to manage up.
Laura, is there anything I didn't ask you that you believe would be valuable for our listeners to hear from you?
Yeah, when creating a positive culture, one of the biggest mistakes that people make is they try to just be nice. Nice. It's not what makes a positive culture. It's not what makes an inspiring work environment. Some of the nicest cultures I've worked in startups, worked in companies, is that they're the least safe. They're the least inspiring. Instead, creating a positive, inspiring, psychologically safe environment with trust and true collaboration are environments where people can show up with their true opinions, where they can say no, where they say, I don't think so. They can disagree. They can have respectful debate, where conflict is generative and creates new outcomes. So these are environments where people can speak their mind, and it's done so in a way where everyone feels included. They're inclusive environments. They are yes and environments where if I make a mistake, I'm not going to be thrown under the bus. If I disagree with you, there aren't going to be subtle repercussions, but instead there's going to be an invitation to lean in, a curiosity, and an appreciation for real conversation, real ideas, and where big risks and work can actually be done to create innovation in an environment where we want to work, we want to come each day.
I love that you said that, because it's a question that I was really trying to fit in. The idea of the difference between nice and safe. And I couldn't find a place to put it, and you did it for me. Thank you so much. Laura, where can people find you? Delizonna.com is my website. Okay. And LinkedIn. Perfect. We'll make sure that those links are in the show notes, as well as ways for people to find the books. Laura Delizonna, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Thank you. It's been a pleasure. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Active Life Podcast. Please remember, give us a hand, rate it, review it wherever you listen to shows. We are on a mission to humanize the healthcare industry by professionalizing the fitness industry to empower the individual to live a life unlimited by the way that their body looks, feels, or performs. If you are inspired by that mission and want to jump on the wagon, find us anywhere. Active Life Professional on Instagram, Active Life RX on Instagram. Come to me personally at Dr. Sean Pastuch. We want to welcome you onto the train. We want you to be a part of the mission. We want to offer you the opportunity to pursue this right alongside us. We're inspired by your effort, and we hope to help you in your journey. Turn pro.